Okay, good evening, everybody. We're now live. I'd just like to start by welcoming everybody to this evening's meeting and also take the opportunity to remind everyone I expect you to treat all members of the committee with respect and to accord the same respect to officers present. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed, as you can see above on the screen. With us, we have our co-opted members. We've also got members of SAFE and Merton as well. So we'll start with item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. Councillor Kohler, I know, can't make it, but we have a substitute tonight. Thank you. No, we don't. Just you're fine. That's fine. We also have Agatha joining us later, Councillor Akagina. And are there, item 2, any declarations of pecuniary interest? No. Next, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we confirm that those are a true and accurate record of that meeting? Councillor Oliver. Yes, over to you. And if you can use your microphone so that we can record it.
Is it all right if I remain seated? Can I sit down? Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a page before the minutes, which is the page which has got the name of all the councillors on it, and it says call in and policy reviews and one-off reviews and all that. And it says there, from May 2008, the Overview and Scrutiny Commission and panels have been restructured and the panels renamed to reflect the local area agreement strategic themes. And isn't it the case that we now have new strategic themes? And so I wondered if that process needed to be repeated. The other thing, well, there's a bit in the minutes that I don't understand, where it says burglary figures have gone, crime figures. There's been a 5% increase in total notifiable offences emerging in the last 12 months, although we've seen a slight dip again in the last 3 months. So things are moving very much in the right direction. I don't think they are.
Okay. Or was there anything else?
That's it. That will do for now.
Well, with the last bit, I do remember the borough commander saying that, and I do agree with your comments on it. Do you want to switch your microphone off, just so we... Thanks, John. I do see your point for querying that, and I think it was a comment. If you remember, she'd been in the post just 3 weeks when she came before us, and I think it was very difficult. She was calling on figures. I think they're right to go in the minutes. I think these figures, though, this has come up at other meetings because things aren't being notified. We're saying that crime is going down, and I think these are questions for the next meeting when we have the borough commander. I think it's a fair observation that you don't think that's what's happening, because I hear that from other residents. Yeah, so I think it's really for the next meeting. We'll raise it. We're coming to that later on the agenda, so I think we should put that down as a question. Okay, come up with that, Tony.
Yes, and I have a question relating to the council plan that we talked at the last meeting. We saw a draft document. I'm wondering when we're going to see a final document and when we're going to get performance measures reported on. It's not stated in the document.
Yeah, well, these are the minutes of saying it. We'll come to that. Rosie, have you got a date for that? No, these are just really the minutes, though, Tony. We're not really debating them. It's what was said. And in terms of the strategic theme and the changes, I mean, there are changes, but these are the minutes, John. So we're just agreeing what was said at that meeting, not really going any deeper. Okay. So can I just say we're agreeing all those for the time being? These are further things. Thank you. Okay, now item 4, we have our new executive directors with us tonight. I've had the opportunity and pleasure to have chats with 2 of them. Polly, I haven't yet. So could I ask you all to introduce yourselves and tell us your priorities, challenges, and what you would like to achieve in your posts. Should we start with you first, Asad, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone at the committee. So I'm Asad Mushtaq. I'm the new Executive Director for Finance and Digital, covering accountancy, ICT, digital, commercial, transactional services. So I've joined in late May. So I'm really pleased to be here. I've come from St Helens Council up in the north, so a long way down the country for me, and really sort of pleased to see the sort of the ambition of the local authority and the direction of travel. So obviously some of the key priorities, especially in this sort of current world, is financial sustainability. It's absolutely critical. It's high on the agenda and it's high on my agenda. So governance processes, making sure we're well resourced and fit for the future, and we're sort of in a good position to tackle any more events or economic events which come our way, which seem to be coming quite regularly. So financial sustainability is absolutely critical. Moving forward in terms of resourcing our priorities in a sustainable way, and growing our digital and IT agenda as well. So for residents, businesses, connectivity in the borough, but also for us as a council. So lots of priorities related to those, and so I'm looking forward to working here for sort of foreseeable and sort of showing the Scrutiny Committee lots of progress on various things. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Asad. Questions from the committee, panel members? Anybody? No, I know some of you have probably had the opportunity to meet Asad. John.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome. I wanted to ask you what your first impressions of Merton were, and in the context of this meeting, what your expectations of Scrutiny are.
So thank you. My first impressions are it's well run, and it's ambitious. It's got an ambition. I think there's a modernisation piece which really needs to sort of take place. I think as a borough as well, I think the profile needs to be raised, not just on a pan-London level, but nationally. It's strategically well located, and we can certainly transform in some key areas, including sort of being more commercial in terms of varying our revenue and being more resilient. So that's on the sort of finance side, and again on the digital side, I think there's a big ambition we can sort of lay forward. So the second. Oh, Scrutiny, yeah. So I've had lots of sort of pre-sessions before this. I think the subgroup of this in terms of the financial management task group will be important. I believe it's something that's well established, and I haven't attended one of those yet. I think I've got one coming up soon, but that's going to be the critical piece for me really in terms of understanding how Scrutiny works. I've already sort of talked about training needs and upskilling members in terms of being able to ask those sort of searching questions around some of the finances. So that's what I'll be trying to work with Scrutiny Commission over the next year to make sure they have the necessary training, and potentially some independent advice as well. I think that's really critical, especially in these areas which are very complex for anyone, let alone members who are new or may not be familiar with this type of area. So I think it's had it's got some challenges in terms of upskilling, but I believe that journey's already sort of started in the previous years, and I'm looking to sort of take that forward over the next period. Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. A very warm welcome. One of the things that this panel has looked at in the past has been website accessibility. And I just wondered if that's something that comes under your remits, and if so, do you have any plans around kind of looking at the website and how it functions for residents?
Yeah, so part of my remit is digital. Polly, when she introduces herself, is around customer. So there's a wider piece between how we sort of enable our residents to interact with us, and absolutely that's a key area in terms of accessibility. Also for digital deprivation, and lots of areas to make sure that all our residents and customers can interact with us as they would wish, and really taking down those barriers. So no, absolutely the use and functionality of the website, of all the channels really, looking at the channels, looking at our all the multiple sort of front doors that we have. We'll be looking at sort of a big piece of work to take that forward to make sure it's fit for what we define as a good digital offering to residents, businesses, and anybody else.
Any other questions from the chamber? No, anybody online? No?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, Mansour. Hello, Mansour. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair and the members. It's really great to see you all. I just need to know, do you find any challenge before the scrutiny or the financial management?
So I apologize, I didn't quite catch that. Can you just repeat that?
I just need to know, do you think that there is any challenge before you in terms of financial management?
Okay, yeah, so apologies for that. Yeah, no, absolutely. As I say, it's a difficult financial environment economically. As a startup, it's very volatile. You know, you look at the sort of cost of living crisis, it's hitting our residents, it's hitting us as a business. You know, you just look at energy and inflation, that's a huge part of our financial projections going forward. So that is a challenge. The other challenge is sort of one year settlements we're getting currently in the wider local government settlement. And as I say, you know, the challenges around sort of being able to balance the books through that, and the constant sort of need to bring forward savings. So fiscally, it's very challenging, and there's no sign of respite, unfortunately. With a sort of new structured organisation as well, so we'll all be looking to support some of our key growth areas as well out of this. And as I say, you know, you just look at sort of building contracts, inflation in there, just as a singular sort of significant area of cost increase. It is a challenge. There's lots to sort of grapple with, and it's just the uncertainty going forward. So that's why I was sort of talking earlier about sort of resilience and varying our sort of income sources as we go forward. But also, you know, we want to deliver for our residents. We don't just want to sort of manage through this period without progressing. And, you know, there's priorities to deliver, but it is probably more challenging than it's ever been. Sort of the double whammy of sort of fiscal events, things outside our control, and then, as I say, limited forward planning being allowed through 1 year settlement. So yeah, it is very challenging at the moment, and it looks like it's continuing for the foreseeable future at least.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mansour. Thanks, Asad. Right, should we move on? Dan, as you're next on the line.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, and thank you for the invite to the meeting tonight. So yes, my name is Dan Jones. I'm the Exec Director for Environment, Civic Pride and Climate. So the key areas I look after are waste collection, street cleansing, highways maintenance, parks. I've also got regulatory services and some of the areas that we're going to sort of covered by this committee as well. So community safety, CCTV, violence against women and girls. I've also got parking and a few other bits and pieces about climate. So my priorities really are for the Borough of Sport and bringing the street cleansing service back in-house over the next few years, as well as commissioning a new waste collection service. So they're some of my key priorities, as well as trying to deliver on the climate emergency agenda, which is a key priority for obviously the country and not the world. Specifically for this committee, then the community safety agenda, which I know there's colleagues on the teams tonight here for that, and violence against women and girls and CCTV, which covers this particular area. And I guess some of the things that I've experienced so far, and my focus has been on perhaps some of the services that I mentioned prior to those, just because of the timing of some of that, is that I would say there's a really, really dedicated and professional and hardworking group of staff in that particular area, notwithstanding the other areas of council, but community safety, violence against women and girls, CCTV, who are doing a lot with very little at the moment. And that's going to be a challenge for us in terms of how we make sure that we've got resilience in the team to deliver on what we need to do in terms of tackling some of the key issues that are obviously a priority in this borough around those areas. So it's happy to take some questions, but I've covered a few bits and pieces there, but it's good to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions from members? Tony.
Yeah, hi, Dan. Looking forward to meeting with you tomorrow. And I mean, it's some of us in the opposition benches find the way that the directorates are structured a bit odd. And there's sort of seems to be a random collection of things under your remit. This is one comment, but are any of those areas that you've not dealt with in the past, given your previous experiences?
No. So there are other areas actually, which I forgot to say, which is leisure and culture and libraries and arts. Yeah. So I've previously had experience of working in those specific areas, but so I would say I've covered most of the areas within my remit in my 24-year career to date. Yeah.
The right person for the job, and everything was covered at the appointments committee.
Thank you, Nick. John.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask you a bit about a comment you made suggesting that maybe you're a bit under-resourced in certain areas. One area that I've noticed that is perhaps green spaces seems to rely on the efforts of one particularly dedicated individual. I just wondered in general, is your observation that you find that things are a bit of a stretch?
So if I just pick up on that particular point about green spaces. So there has been a restructure that's been on the table for a while now. And I think it's been waiting for the executive director team to get into place before that goes into effect. And that will address some of those issues in the green space team when that then comes into effect. And I've had a review of that over the last sort of 2 months that I've been here. And I'm pretty happy with what's been proposed. There's a few tweaks to make. But once we get those that completed and we get some more resources on in the team, then we won't be so reliant on one individual who's doing a fantastic job, but is let's say a little bit stretched. So that will cover off that. I think in terms of a general observation, and I've only been here 2 months, so still a lot more to look at and understand, is that I said it beforehand, is that there's lots of people looking very hard and doing a fantastic job in the council. And there are some areas where we need to look at in terms of whether we are a little bit too thin on the ground and whether there are some areas where we aren't as resilient as we could be, let's say. So, and that's not unusual in councils nowadays after the amount of money that's been taken out of them over the last few years. Successive sort of budget reviews, etc. So it's an area that we're all looking at, and I think that the observation so far is that there's a really dedicated and hard-working group of staff that we're here to support and try to bolster with any additional resources that we can.
Thank you, Dan. Sorry, Mike has just got something first, Tony, then you.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to that. Although I know you've been here for a few weeks, months now already. An area that concerns me is in community safety is street lighting, and I wonder what plans you've got to look at street lighting, because there's been a big advantage that low energy lighting is very bright and lower cost. But I think in a number of our streets we get reports of people saying that there are pools of darkness and bright light, and as you walk along you're going from light to dark, and it doesn't seem to disperse as much as it used to. I wonder what experience you've got of looking at street lighting as a safety thing across your past experience, and what work is going on in that area and how you can prioritize that. The second area that I bring as a focus is our high streets, sort of smaller scale high streets with a lot of flats above shops and businesses that may or may not be adhering to the terms of their contracts for commercial waste, and those streets are sort of beset by a lot of fly tipping. There's not always fly tipping, it's just inappropriate waste management from the businesses or the flats above the shops. So what level of priority are you putting in that and into the new contract as well?
Sure, thank you very much. And I think you did raise this in a sort of planning meeting that we had. Yes. So it's not a surprise to me about street lighting. So street lighting is an interesting one. So yes, the energy efficient bulbs that are in LED light and in lanterns and LEDs do save a significant amount of money. But there are challenges in certain areas where the lighting perhaps is perceived to be not as good as it was before. I think the best thing to do with those, in my experience, is take them on a case-by-case basis. So it might be there are contributing factors to why that is happening. It might be some overhanging branches that are cutting out light, or the general environment doesn't reflect back as well as it could be in certain areas. So there's no sort of one size fits all on this kind of thing. It's best to take it on a case by case basis and review it. We have, there's been numerous occasions when I've looked at street lighting from a community safety aspect, particularly around alleyways, parks that aren't so well lit, routes from town centres to public transport interchanges and things like that, where people will use them late at night on the way home and perhaps they're not as well lit as they could be. And in those cases, we have worked with community safety colleagues, the police and parks colleagues to see if we can improve those. That might mean changing the lighting from high to low or low to high, depending on the situations, or putting in different types of lighting. So happy to take them on a case by case basis where members of the councillors or members of the public raise them to us. So happy to do that. Flats and above shops, yeah, flats above shops are always an issue in whatever borough or every council you work in, because it is difficult for people who live in flats above shops to dispose of their waste. If they don't have sort of container areas at the backs of their properties to keep waste outside their homes. So what we found in some places that I've worked is time-banded collections work quite well, where residents are told what time of the day they can put out the waste for collection, and then you collect it on those frequency of collections. The challenge is where you have a transient population, where there's a lot of churn in terms of people who are living in those flats above shops, and the landlords aren't as responsible as they perhaps should be in informing them what the changes might be. So you have to work with the landlords and the agents in terms of making sure that the messages get across. It's about education and then sort of getting people to comply. And if they don't, and none of that works, then you end up with enforcement. And at the moment, we are looking at increasing our enforcement in certain areas where things like you've just said has become a problem, where there's deliberate fly tipping going on, I would say. Not people leaving it out responsibly, but where's fly tipping.
Just to come back briefly on that, I think that you're raising a good point about the flats above the shops, but the experience of a number of us who've got wards who've got sort of trading high streets is that during the pandemic, when the business was shut, there wasn't so much of a problem. So that it's the enforcement of commercial waste agreements for businesses who, when they, you know, they're one bag or whatever with Biffa or whoever it is, or with Veolia, they put more out, and then the people of other shops are seeing that happening, so they put theirs out as well. So I think it's enforcement of the commercial waste contracts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sorry if I didn't pick that up point. I totally agree with you as well. So it's just the commercial premises as well, rather than domestic properties. Yeah.
So one other issue is, so you're going to be covering the relationships we've got with the companies that we outsource work to, so Veolia and ID Verdi, and we get a lot of complaints, the residents complaining about the delivery of services from both. So it's sort of a bit like we're nobbling you at these introductory meetings, but that would seem to be an area to look at. It seems to me that how well we can manage those relationships.
Yes, it's fine. I don't mind being nobbled at these meetings. It's my job. So yes, there are always some issues with these high profile, high volume services in all the councils I've worked in. I would say from my experience, the Veolia contract here is a good one in terms of collection. Yes, there's always going to be some mistakes that they make or some areas where it could be better performing, but my observation is a good one. I think the ID Verdi contract is struggling a little bit, and we're reviewing that, and the lead member has made it quite clear that she wants me to focus on their performance at the moment, and also reviewing what we do with the extension, or possible extension, sorry, to the contract in 2025. So there's a particular focus on the ID Verdi contract at the moment in terms of what happens next, and obviously you'll be aware that Cabinet has approved to go to the market for the waste collection service, and we are going through that process. So that's a key area for us to make sure that we're on top of that contractor in this kind of period of uncertainty for them, whether they may be, if they bid, the contractor in the future. So we're quite aware that we need to keep on top of that contractor relationship for both of those services.
Thank you, Dan. Agatha, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for being late. I had another meeting. I just want to concur with what Councillor Brunt said about the lighting, the LED, which I've had several complaints over the few years, that they're not very good. They're bright when you're standing there, but if you're walking down the road, the other end looks very dark, and people are quite scared at time and wary. You know, they keep complaining nothing being done. The other lights were much better. The older ones, the low emission ones, you could actually see the road, whereas this one you can't. The fact that we're trying to maybe it's more economical, it's fine, but you have to put people's safety aspect in view as well. I mean, I live on the road where there's about quite a few lampposts, and it's the same thing. You can see where you are, unless you go to the next one, you can't see. And it's quite along other roads as well. And I keep constantly getting people complaining about it. So since it sort of come up, I think it'd be good if we could sort of have a look at them and see what we can do for people's safety as well, because we're talking about safety and, you know, maybe might not enough resources for police or for people to come out. You know, if things are happening and the lights aren't really that great, that would be the first thing we would say, that there's no security with the lights. But even though you say in parks, you have to be careful because you don't want glaring lights in certain areas. But where people live and they're walking down the road at night or even in the afternoon in the winter time, they want to be able to see where they're going without having to look behind them all the time. So it'd be good if we could actually have a look at that sort of subject for us. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So that's two mentions of street lighting. So I'll make sure that we take that back and see what can or and if what can't be done in certain aspects. But definitely, I did say, I don't know if you caught it, but if there are particular areas where you're getting a lot of issues raised, please let us know, and we will go and have a specific look at those specific locations for you, see what can be done.
Thanks, Dan. I think that's it. Some roads do appear worse than others, and I think we all should report those roads individually and get them looked at. Nick.
So back to the street lighting. So my understanding was a couple of years ago that we had a large scale failing of all the lights and we had to go through and replace them all. Is that process now finished or is it still ongoing? Because that could be part of the problem. The lights might be just part of the ones that failed.
Okay, well, thank you. I didn't quite realise that there was some failure around particular lights. Okay, so can you let me take that away and find out a bit more about this, and I can come back and let you know either outside the meeting with a note or at the next committee.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so we can circulate it in the committee. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and I don't know whether they've all now been replaced or not, so I will have to find out.
When I say failure, they diminished really quickly, so they just started to just fade basically.
I think Cannon Hill Lane was one, wasn't
yes,
it? It was very, very dim of an evening. They were on, but very dim. It was very noticeable. And that might be what's happening in other parts of the borough. So thank you, Dan. Right. Well, I think we've finished. There's no one online with any questions for Dan. So we've saved you not to last deliberately, Polly. It's happened that way, but you have the microphone.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, it's a bit floppy. Okay. Right. My name is Polly Chock. I'm the new Executive Director for Innovation and Change, and I started back in April. So I've been here a couple of months now. So my department covers a range of the corporate services that sort of make up the engine room of the organisation. So communications and consultation, HR and OD, policy and strategy, legal and governance and sort of the SLLP function, and also customer services as well. So there's, you know, a wide range of corporate functions there. My previous role was at London Borough of Hackney, where I was for 20 years. So this has been a big change for me and a much longer commute, which I'm enjoying. But I'm very well acquainted with the Northern Line. It's actually a really great opportunity to get to know another part of London that I didn't know well before. I'm really enjoying that. So my coming into post, I think for me, the biggest initial focus across all of those things is around HR and workforce. So one of my initial observations, like my colleagues, is that Merton has an incredibly committed and dedicated workforce, some really amazing staff. But we do have a huge workforce challenge here. We have an aging workforce. So we are sitting on a bit of a retirement time bomb here, just in terms of the aging profile of the workforce. And, we don't have, enough sort of younger people coming into the organisation. But more than that, we are actually struggling to recruit into every part of the organisation. And as a result, we are spending too much on agency, and we're too heavily reliant on agency. And what I want to do is get us to a position where we have a permanent workforce, and then we're not over relying on agency staff anymore, and that we can get into a position to recruit the best people into Merton. And there's a number of underlying issues with the recruitment piece, which is, some of them are just the fact that the recruitment market in general is incredibly tough at the moment. London boroughs always have a very competitive time recruiting because there's 32 of us. So, if you live in, I don't know, Bristol, and you want to work for the council, there's just the one, but there's 32 of them here. So we've got a lot of competition, as well as all the other big employers that London has to offer. So we, as a sort of smaller outer London borough, we have to be able to punch above our weight in that very competitive recruitment market. So there's a big piece of work around branding and marketing and attraction there, really changing the image and reputation of Merton as a place to work, which is going to be so key to us getting those people through the door. There's also a slightly less interesting but equally important piece around recruitment processes, because they're really quite clunky and bureaucratic and slow, and sometimes people reach for agency staff just because they need somebody in quickly, and we need to streamline those processes. So we've got a review of those underway at the moment. We aren't competitive on pay in a lot of areas. In terms of, if you benchmark us against other London boroughs, we've fallen behind. So that causes problems. It's not right across, but in some key areas that does. So all of those things need looking at as part of the whole people and culture piece. And there's some other places where Merton really needs to focus there, particularly around skills and training, because we have got skills deficits in some parts of the organisation, and also around EDI, where there have been some sort of early efforts made, but again, quite a lot of work to do. So I think HR, I suppose since I've been here, it's that side of things that's taken up the majority of my time, but there's other really important pieces of work as well. So the whole, beyond recruitment, the image and reputation of Merton, the story of the place is something that I'm really focused on. And I think it's one of the reasons that I was recruited to the role, because that's kind of what I do and what I have done in my past job. Something about the brand of Merton, something about the way that it's perceived across London, if it's perceived at all. Because I'll be honest with you, when I said I was coming here, people were like, "Where's that?" I'm like, "You have to say it's Wimbledon," and they go, "Oh, right, I've heard of that." But it is that kind of little known thing, and it's a hidden gem. It's fantastic. There's an amazing story to be told. But we need to do a big piece of work in putting Merton on the map. That will help us with recruitment. It will help us with inward investment. It will help us with civic pride. It will be good across a whole range of things. So there's that. And then the other thing really is working with Assad on a properly organised corporate transformation programme. So my job title is Change and Innovation. I was brought here to change things and to innovate. But we need to have a corporately led transformation program that looks across the 4 areas, that one of which is the people and culture piece, one of which is that piece around story and reputation, one of which is financial sustainability. And that's really not about having transformation that isn't led by savings, but actually transforms our kind of structural way we do business to help us be financially sustainable in the long term. And the other piece, as Asap was referring to earlier, is customer and digital. So the 2 of us will be working together to put together a transformation program across those 4 themes that will help the organisation change over the next couple of years to be able to do business in the way that we're going to need to in the future.
Thank you, Polly. Lexmi.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting to know the changes you're going to bring to Merton. But I just wondered, as an outer London borough, does that also pose a problem for recruitment? Because there are inner London pay scales are very different from outer London pay scales.
Well, we need to be competitive with the other outer London boroughs. Inner London's always going to pay a bit more. And that's just the way it is. But we do need to make sure that we're keeping pace with the other outer London boroughs so that we can compete with them. And at the moment, we're not in some areas. I think we're really lucky here because although we are outer London, having that Northern Line link into Morden and the fact that the Civic is right next door to it actually makes it a really, really easy commute from a lot of places. I mean, you know, I'm coming all the way from Hackney. On a good day, it only takes me an hour and 5 minutes, which in London terms isn't a bad commute. You know, we are half an hour from Victoria, you know, 35 minutes from Oxford Street. It's a really, really well-connected place. So I don't think that that's a barrier to recruitment. And particularly now we're in a more hybrid working world where people can be at home a couple of days a week and, you know, aren't expected to be here every day. So I don't think location's a problem for us. I think it's more a question of what is our proposition? You know, why would people come and work at Merton? I think we need to do more in reaching out to local residents. I think that's a hugely untapped resource. We do have lots of local people who work here, but actually, I think there's probably a lot of local residents who've never considered us as an employer. So I think we need to do a much better job. And that's about providing opportunity to local young people. But as well as that, it's reaching into the kind of the skills that every London borough has got highly educated and skilled people living in it. So persuading them that they want to come and work for us is something where we really want to put some, you know, to put some effort, but also letting London know what this place is about and getting them behind the ambition for the place. You know, we came here collectively because the leader and the chief executive had a vision and an ambition for a place that made us want to come and join it. And now we have to do that at the next layer down and underneath that as well. And I think we can turn the situation around with recruitment, but it's got to be a real focus for all of us.
No, it's just that from central government, we are seen as an outer London borough, so our funding is lower, and that has an effect on the budget setting process. So that is why I said our pay scales are less than the inner London, say Wandsworth for some Tooting.
No, I mean that's right. And as I said, outer London will always pay less than inner London, but we, as I say, we have to make sure we're keeping pace with our statistical neighbours, so to speak. You know, we can't compare our salaries with Richmond and Wandsworth because they've got a shared authority. The jobs are bigger. So, but if you look at boroughs with a similar funding formula and demographic makeup and outer London status as us, we need to be keeping pace with our competitors. And we also need to be finding other things that are going to define us. So we need to be looking at our family-friendly policies. We need to be looking at all of those things that might attract people to come and work for us. So we're doing a policy review in HR as well, because a lot of our policies haven't been looked at for a very long time. So there are other things than salary that will attract people to roles. I mean, nobody comes to work for the council because they want to make their fortune. People come into public service for a whole range of reasons, and if we want them to choose us, it's not enough to just say, oh, well, we pay as well as Kingston or whatever. We have to have an offer that's more compelling. And part of that is about developing the recruitment brand. And that work's kind of underway at the moment.
I think first.
Thank you. Was that me first? Was it?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. So I find myself saying this more often than I'd like to say it, but when I first got elected to the council in 1990, I was hearing very much the same thing about recruitment and retention of staff, the high use of agency staff, and that's 33 years ago. The overwhelming issue then was housing cost, and that's got even worse now, which is why we don't have the young workforce that you described, perhaps. So I wonder what plans you have to address that, because although you refer to us as an outer London borough, we're sort of that limbo outer London borough, because we're not a fully outer London borough onto the home counties, and we're not an inner London borough. So although yes, some of the transport links are good, the round London transport links are poor. So we're not attracting people from neighbouring boroughs to come and work here, other than those on the strategic, the Northern Line or District Line perhaps, and the main line through Wimbledon. So what thoughts have you got about how to address that? I mean, obviously the council has got a home building plan. That's one aspect. But modern apprenticeships may be offering educational opportunities where we get people who are at a young age who can build their career and build their learning with Merton.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think that local government across the board is taking apprenticeships far more seriously. I mean, the apprenticeship levy forced people into doing that. But I think, you know, because the council I just came from always had a lot of apprentices because it's a stockholding authority with 22,000 council houses. So there was always apprenticeships in the trades, but actually over recent years, it's been developing apprenticeships in accountancy and communications and HR and all of those things. And Merton is very much on that journey. And I think that we need to invest more in apprenticeships. I think we need to make sure that we're supporting those apprenticeships properly within the organisation. We're looking at, you know, our graduate programme. Instead of using the national graduate programme for local government, we're moving to targeting our graduate programme at local people. And in particular, you know, care experience local people. So there's a big piece of work there. We're looking at taking a much bigger look at things like work experience and so on. But in terms of that local workforce, I mean, Merton has about 40% of its staff that live locally. And that might not sound a lot, but actually in the London context, it's really quite high. So my last authority, we only had 24% of the workforce lived in the borough. That dropped over 20 years from 40% because the inner London housing costs are so prohibitive. And if you look at boroughs like Camden and Islington, there's a kind of around the 10% mark. So the outer London boroughs do a lot better because the housing costs out here, although they're still high, they are less than they are in inner London. What I would be looking at though is the people who already live here. So we have amazing people that live in this borough. You know, they're already paying the housing costs that live here, so they're not going to be prohibitive to them. It's about giving them, really selling to them the advantages of working locally, which is about giving something back for your community, losing the commute, really, you know, really that there is something, you know, having lived and worked in the same borough for 20 years, I can, you know, I can be a great advocate for it. And I think that we should be saying to our local people, look, if you want an opportunity in these whole range of things, you don't have to get on the tube every day. You don't have to go somewhere else. You can do it here. And I know, and the transport links across South London aren't great. Maybe the Superloop buses will help. I don't know. But we really do need to be looking on our doorsteps for part of that workforce challenge. And you're absolutely right to say a lot of it's to do with younger people.
Thank you, Polly. Before I go, we're going to go around, John. There's quite a few of you now. Could you switch your microphone off when they're asking their questions, Polly?
Oh,
Would
sorry.
you mind? Just so we can. Agatha first. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome and thank you. You said the leader and the chief executive had a vision, and that's why you came to help them along with their vision. It's good to have vision. But I always think that if you have a vision, make sure that you take the people with you rather than do things to the people. It's all right saying you want more people that live in the borough, which is to work, which is a great thing. But there's so much bureaucracy in trying to get the job. You know, so many people apply for jobs, they can't get it. They have to go through rigmaroles, they can't do this, they can't do that. So if you're trying to encourage more people that live in the borough to work, you have to make it attractive for them. You have to make them feel that they're valued. And not that you need a workforce, you're just putting somebody in. I believe in working for the people, with the people, not to the people, because that's where I think that's where we are. And we don't seem to get anywhere, really. And I'm interested why you interested in getting more people that work locally as a workforce. Is there a reason behind it, apart from that it'd be easier for them? But is there something else behind the reasoning as why you want to get more people that live locally?
Thank you. So I'll start at the end with that. I think partly it is about, you know, it is about this being a very competitive marketplace for work, and actually, you know, people who live locally, it is convenient for them. So they do have an added incentive to want to come and work for us, as well as it. But the incentive isn't just about convenience. You find that a lot of people who work for their local authority get a lot out of the fact that they're working for the area where they live and they're serving the community that they live in, and that's a great thing. But also they bring something. They bring something to the authority, which is that community insight. They bring a kind of a level of discretionary effort quite often, which is to do with the fact that they're local people and they have that additional level of commitment. So I think that there's a huge benefit both for them and for the authority in having local people here. That, you know, because as you say, we want to be a council that works with our residents and rather than doing stuff to them. And the more of the council that is our residents, in some ways, the more successful we'll be. On the and actually we have, you know, we have got a new approach to community engagement and consultation, which we're going to start rolling out so that we can be more inclusive and involving, which I can, you know, happy to talk about here sometime. The thing about the application processes, I mean, you are right, and I think that most people who have never worked for a local authority, when they start applying for the job, it's just a kind of, oh my goodness moment, because the hurdles we put up, and I say we collectively as local government, the hurdles we put up for people, the barriers, the form filling, the kind of the person specifications and all of that, they're really off-putting and intimidating. And I think we need a much more inclusive approach to recruitment across the board. I think it still needs to be rigorous and it still needs to be based on high standards, but it needs to be, and it also needs to be appropriate for the level of the role too, because we seem to throw exactly the same recruitment kitchen sink at very, very junior jobs as we do at senior ones. So there's a whole piece of work to be done in reforming those processes, because if people are going to fall at the first hurdle or be put off by our processes, we won't get them through the door. So I think you're right to raise that.
Say that another thing that's lacking is that if people fall at the first hurdle, whatever, we should really write back to them and say you didn't get the job, because there's a lot of not getting back to people and people get irate. So hence a lot of people won't bother because they think they're not going to write back anyway. You don't want to get that sort of attitude for
and it's
any employer.
And it's difficult, especially when you have a lot of applications for jobs. But you're right, we need to be better at acknowledging people's efforts and trying to encourage them to try again and those sort of things. So yeah, absolutely stuff to look at.
Thank you. Bisoma.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to your new role, Polly. And as someone who also works in recruitment, I really do empathise with you regarding like the challenges in trying to attract new talent into the council. Because even in my role, it's quite tough, even with all the innovations we've put in place. But I've got two questions regarding the task you're taking on. The first one's around the number of vacancies that we've got. So are we setting specific recruitment targets for the authority as a way of measuring, you know, how our recruitment is going and whether we're filling the essential roles that we need to fill? And my second question's around the communication strategies that we're using to reach the people that we really want to get in these roles. And given that we're focusing on local people, my thought would be around not just getting our digital marketing right and making sure that that's as targeted as possible, but I think there's also a lot of value in-person sort of localized recruitment that sometimes gets lost nowadays, where we think everything's online. But actually, when you go out into the communities where you want to get people and actually engage with people face to face or at local careers fairs or through local institutions, like, I don't know, colleges, perhaps if we're targeting college leavers, perhaps, we might get a good response there rather than heavily relying on digital marketing to try and attract people. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely agree about the marketing, and we need a very mixed approach because we need to be targeting local people, but we also need to be targeting the kind of the best of talent across the rest of London as well. At the moment, we don't really do recruitment marketing. We just sort of stick things on the council website and hope for the best in the most part. And obviously for more senior roles, we use, you know, headhunters and people like that to help. But generally speaking, there hasn't been any kind of real marketing strategy. So I've been thinking about this a lot. As I said, we need to change the brand. We need to change the image of the council. We need a decent recruitment website where we can not just host jobs, but host a lot of fantastic content about what a great place that this is to work. And also where we can do that ongoing attraction piece around the areas of recruitment, we will always have like social care and stuff like that, you know, so there's that piece. I think when we're targeting residents, I think we need to use all the channels that we have. So we have the council magazine that goes out 3 or 4 times a year. You know, if recruitment campaigns coincide with that, they should go in there. We should use the council newsletter, which has tens of thousands of subscribers, the email newsletter. We should use social and LinkedIn and stuff in a much more creative way than we currently do. And there's also a thing about leaders in the organization. We all have a role to play. You know, we came to the council because the leadership of the council made us think that it was a good place to come, and we have a role to play in using our networks and our social media channels and going to conferences and all of those things, and that's really important. Totally agree on face-to-face, and I would love us to be in a position next year when big events happen like the Mitcham Carnival that we can have stands at things like that. I've also started having some meetings with Clarion about how we can re-establish that relationship with our tenants that you always kind of lose a bit when you outsource housing, but how we can actually start to be going out, talking to the tenants on the estates, trying to get them to come and work in roles here, using some of their kind of face-to-face events to piggyback on of those, so that we're kind of trying to get our residents at all levels. And it's quite labour intensive, but I think you're right to say that that sort of face-to-face engagement does get results. And also sometimes you can actually face-to-face help people through some of the processes a little bit as well, you know. So what was the first bit of your question? The second bit was about marketing, and the first bit was,
It was around recruitment targets.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think we need to look at targets, and I think we need to think carefully about what they are. So for me, the real priority is driving down agency spend and getting people into permanent roles, because that's important for the council's financial sustainability, but it's also important for the stability of the organisation. You know, there's something about the way the organisation feels when everyone's got the word interim in front of their job title on their email. You know, it's about making the organisation more stable. It's a stable, sustainable workforce. So that's a really important thing to measure us against. But I do think we need to think about what those KPIs might look like. Are we, you know, would we like to see an increase in the percentage of applications that are coming from local postcodes, for example? You know, you know, what are we measuring? In the end, if we've got permanent jobs filled, you know, by high quality candidates, then we're winning. So we need to work out within that what the important measurements for us, and I think we still need to do some thinking about that.
Thanks, Polly. You're getting plenty of good questions tonight and answering them all well. Stuart, you're next.
Thank you. And yeah, welcome, Polly, as well as everyone else has said. It's welcome to hear what you're saying about changing Merton's reputation. I don't know what reputation it has. I'm certain it's a very positive one, but I'm sure any work that can bolster it further is welcome. But what I would ask is, you know, while the work you do, I'm sure will be great, they can take a while to change. While something like salary can change minds pretty quickly. And so I guess I ask, to what degree do you think our recruitment problems at the moment are down to our ability to pay people at a competitive rate? And what capacity do we have to adjust that within the current budgets? Can we actually move those rates up so that we can attract even better candidates?
Well, there's a big piece of work to be done on that. And a full pay review is a massive job. It's an 18-month job. It involves a lot of consultation with trade unions. It involves lots of, you know, there's a lot of benchmarking work that's already been done, but that's not a switch that you can flick overnight. And that obviously there's got to be a big piece of work on the financial impact. Although obviously our inability to recruit to our current pay scales is leading to agency spend, which is higher than it would be if our pay scales were where they needed to be, if that makes sense. So but you know, and Asad and I will work together on that. But it isn't a quick fix, because you can't just change the pay scales overnight. So once we've worked something out that's financially sustainable, there's just such a long process that you have to go through to change it. So we've got to do it bit by bit. So the next thing we're looking at is the next tier down. So we've come in as executive directors, but underneath us, we've got a lot of interim posts, you know, agency staff. We need to sort that bit out so we can get a tier in underneath us that can lead some of that work lower down, whilst at the same time as launching a piece of work that looks at the whole organisation. But it's, you know, because on paper you could say, well, look, we're spending less because our salaries are lower, but in reality you're spending quite a lot more because you're having to use agency. And it's quite difficult to convince people to do the temp to perm shift when they're earning so much more on agency. So, you know, there is a lot of work to do, but it is going to take a while. So we have to be working on the other stuff in the meantime.
So yes, welcome aboard. And I like a lot of the things you're saying, actually. I love the fact that you've got innovation and change in your title, because I think we need a lot of that. And I'm new to being a councillor, and I've often tried to work out, well, what are Merton doing and what are other councils doing? And I'm often amazed by what other councils do and how innovative they are, piloting different ideas, ways of trying to solve some of the problems that we all face. So we've talked a lot about the recruitment. I just want to move it on to the comms and consultation side of things, and how we can get people more impressed by what it is the council is doing through some of the activities that we're doing. There's a lot of criticism that people feel they're not consulted. I think that's tricky, because I think you can over consult, I think. But if anything, we probably underdo it with a lot of things that the council's looking to do. And I do think there's a fantastic possibility for improving communications through some of the innovative things that we're going to be doing as a council. But I accept the fact that that's going to take time to change the perception of what a great job this council's doing. But I think we need to get on with it, and I'm welcome aboard.
Thank you. So PR and communications is my professional background. So I started as a press officer in Hackney about 150 years ago, but that's what I do. And part of, I suppose, changing the reputation of that particular place was something that I dedicated quite a lot of my career to. And Hackney started with a very, very bad reputation, which needed to be turned around. Merton doesn't start with a very bad reputation. It almost starts with no reputation, aside from the people who live here, who obviously can see all the great things about it. But for people from outside, even as kind of close by as Southeast London, they're still like, oh, where's that? So I think it's I think there's a big piece of work there, but we're not turning around a juggernaut, because we're not trying to undo a bad image. We're just trying to promote a good one. So I think there is a lot of the kind of great work that's going on in a lot of councils. There's work like that going on here. So some of the work that's going on in children's services, for example, is actually sector leading. But what we've not had until recently is the resource in the corporate communications function to promote anything. I mean, the corporate communications function was cut back so hard that all it could really do was respond to crises as they happened. So there's been a bit of growth in there, which is really good. We've just got to make sure we use that well. We've got to make sure that we're telling those stories. They really help with recruitment as well, actually. Indeed. All of those things. So it all ties together. In terms of consultation, it's a really interesting one. So people will always complain they haven't been consulted if you make a decision they don't like. That's fair enough. But councils have a legal duty to consult properly when they're making changes to people's services. And actually, they'll face judicial review if they don't. I've always, in my past role, taken consultation really, really seriously. I don't think that councils should consult people when they have already made their mind up, unless they have a statutory duty to, because sometimes you just have to consult, like on a traffic scheme or something like that. It's the law, you have to consult. But generally speaking, I think we should be consulting and engaging people where their voice can have an impact. And I think sometimes people consult just because they feel they ought to, rather than because they actually really want to listen. But it needs to be done well. So a great principle for me is that we go to people and we want to talk to them. We don't expect them to come to us. We don't expect them to turn up at a meeting on a Wednesday evening in the council chamber. We don't expect them to go off to some dusty church hall somewhere. We go to where they are. We go to carnivals and marketplaces and shopping centres, and that's where we have conversations with people. It's not good enough to just stick a survey up online and say, well, there was your chance. If you want to hear people's voices, you've got to give them the chance to speak. You've got to go to where they are and listen to them. And also, I think, be open about consultation. So councils can be quite inclined to go for, right, okay, what do you want, A, B, or C? And actually, there's a stage before that where you need to go and talk to people about how they feel about service, how they use the service, what they'd like, and use that insight to help shape proposals A, B, or C before you then go out to consult. But this stuff is labour intensive, it's resource intensive, it's time intensive. It took me probably 8 years to establish that engagement-led model of communications in Hackney, with a lot more corporate resource than I've got here. So how do you, how do we shape something with Merton that's sustainable for the kind of council this is, but also genuinely gives our residents a voice? For me, the important thing is hearing from people that don't go to residents associations, that don't turn up at things. You know, that's the vast majority of people. How do we hear from them, and how do we give them the chance to have their say?
Sorry, just to add, your councillors can play a huge role in helping you do
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
And we feel, some of us feel, we're not used enough to feed back to you what all our residents are saying. So we are a conduit through which you can hear what people think. And we're not used to the extent that I think we should be.
And it would be really helpful for us when we have, so we took a paper this week to sort of informal meeting of cabinet around a new approach to community engagement, and we will have a bit of extra resource in the team, so we will be able to do a bit more of this ambitious stuff. And actually you guys can be great in helping to promote that out in the community, so that we really can get, you know, get that stuff out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Polly. I think saving you to last, I think you've got more questions than anybody. Just before we finish with you, obviously I'm going to be biased for this panel, but we have got a scrutiny officer leaving us in a couple of weeks, Stella, and I wondered, have we got anybody, is that in hand?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure that Keith and Octavia will be well on it. So
Thank you. Just want to make sure, because I know that my colleagues down there will be saying scrutiny is at the top of their agenda. Right, okay. Did you have your hand up then, Jonas?
Hi, again, welcome. Yeah, I've been very interested in what you've said. It occurs to me that rebranding, which you've mentioned in the context of recruitment, but rebranding is a bigger thing than that, isn't it? And I'm wondering why civic pride isn't part of your area, or at least if it's not, then that's something to be done with civic pride as a rebranding exercise.
well, civic pride's in Dan's job title, but it's in all of our sort of core responsibilities because it's a key strategic plank in the council's plan. And so all of us have to deliver on the civic pride agenda. And I agree with you that the image, the reputation, the brand of the borough is very much something that can engender civic pride. And, you know, in my last role, I was part of the I Love Hackney campaign, which is a huge, been going since 2006 and is still going, and has a huge part in the way people feel about the place. And so those kind of campaigns, those kind of efforts to make people feel good about where they live is a really important part of that. It really is. So, but as I said, civic pride is all of our job. Anyway.
Thank you, Polly. I like the bit about civic pride. I think we all have a duty in that respect. I think if people take more pride in where they live, they're less inclined to chuck litter down and might actually say it in the bin. Graffiti, so many things. I think we all need to, I know people in the chamber here are, and the vast majority of people are within Merton, but it's something that we all need to take responsibility for. Are there any other questions? Any online? No. In that case, I think we'll move on. Thank you, Polly. And we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda. And I think, Dan, you might want to stay for the PSPO if you don't. But oh, right. Apart from that, I think, as said, and Polly, I think we've finished. So if you want to, you're welcome to stay. But I think after PSPO, Dan will probably go, but there might be something you might just want to touch on. Thank you. Right, so we'll go on to PSPO. And I know Katie's been waiting online patiently, and you've all seen the artwork that's come through, but I'll hand over to Katie and she can talk us through. Thank you. Hi, Katie.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Good evening, members. You'll remember that we attended Overview Scrutiny back in March regarding the borough-wide alcohol-related PSPO. Following that meeting, the PSPO was agreed by Cabinet. You'll remember there was discussion at the meeting regarding the signage for the PSPO, and we agreed to bring back the new signs, which we've circulated copies of in your pack. The signs are designed around the ethos of making Merton a responsible drinking borough. They also cover our requirements legally to make sure that we discharge the order correctly. They've been signed off by Councillor Stringer. The order itself is going live on the 25th of July, and the signs will be erected from the 10th of July onwards. So we'll take any comments or questions regarding the signage.
Thanks, Casey. Any questions? John, was that John?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, there's one thing that confuses me about it, and this is where it says to give the police or authorised person your name and address at the bottom. But how do you know who an authorised person is?
So in this instance, the authorised person will be the Kingdom enforcement officers. So they have delegated powers to issue an FPN alongside the police.
Sorry, can I just follow that up? I mean, we were discussing that earlier, and maybe Councillor Rice wants to say something about it. But we wondered if maybe it was possible to explain that in some way. You want to come up with your point because it relates?
It says in the text that this has been designed by comms and legal. Well, legal one, as far as I can see. I mean, this is very legalese. It's maybe it has to be. I don't know. I worry that nobody's going to read it or even understand it. And if it could be written in plainer English, perhaps with a QR code that's got all the mumbo jumbo technical stuff that people could pick up on and read, that may be another way of doing it, so that you've got less text, clearer messages about what people are meant to be doing, and all the detail in an associated QR code that you can pick up and read.
Thank you, Councillor. I do agree. Sorry, Kelvin. Okay. I do agree. It is very legal speak. There's a couple of reasons for that. We would have liked it to be in plainer English, but our legal team did some research, and we do need to have that wording on there in order to discharge the actual PSPO order. But in addition to that, there will be full information on our website, and the Kingdom officers will be giving out leaflets which are written in plain English, which we're working on at the moment. They don't have to have the legal requirements, that very clearly, in simple language, explain what the PSPO is.
Happy with that. Any other questions? Thank you, Katie. Are there any other questions in here? Lexmi.
Will the Kingdom of thank you for your presentation, but will the Kingdom officers have some sort of authorization card or something that will let members of the public know that they have the pass to do what they are doing?
Yeah, I mean, the Kingdom officers are obviously out patrolling also for litter offences and for people dropping cigarette butts, and they have a uniform which is labelled and they have ID. So hopefully residents will recognise them, having seen them out on the streets anyway. And as part of their duties, they will be helping to enforce the PSPO. But I suppose also just to remember, as we've discussed previously, the focus of the PSPO is around offering support to people with whom drinking has become a problem. So one of the things they'll be doing is, alongside giving out that leaflet explaining the PSPO, is a leaflet to WDP, recently rebranded as VIA, who are drug and alcohol treatment service provider in Merton. So they'll be giving those to the street drinkers and explaining how they can refer themselves in to get some additional support.
Tony.
Yeah, sorry, there is another point in that the first sentence, I mean, the second sentence is 4 lines long, which is, it's unfortunate that it's so long. But in the first sentence, is it really the consumption of alcohol that's the problem? Isn't it the behavior as a result of consuming the alcohol? So, I mean, I'm not even sure it's really accurate.
Do you mind if I come in on that, Councillor?
Yeah.
My name's Calvin McLean. I'm the Assistant Director for Public Protection. So you're absolutely right. It is the behaviour, but the behaviour is led by consumption of alcohol. So what this doesn't do is stop people drinking in public places. This allows for a degree of discretion for police officers or authorised officers, so they could be kingdom officers or council officers, or whoever we authorise under our scheme of delegation to enforce it, to make sensible decisions and not have a sledgehammer to crack a nut approach that just simply drinking alone is enforceable. And yourselves, I think, at the committee that we discussed this, and certainly cabinet, were really clear that this could not lead to a ban on drinking. So the consumption of alcohol, we know, in the antisocial behaviour community safety world, can sometimes lead to antisocial behaviour. So if someone happened to be walking down the street drinking, it's not going to stop them from drinking. So we have to be really clear about that. And we take the point about too much wording. We would prefer less. We do have legal requirements to ensure that the signage it is beyond reproach. So at the last meeting, we had that discussion, if I remember rightly, and this is the finalised, agreed version. Yes, legal, you're right, legal has had a big sway here. But I don't think the idea of a QR code is a bad idea to give people more information. But I certainly don't think we can change the wording. There has been a lot of talk and back and forth on this. But I certainly have sympathy with the points you've made.
John.
Thank you. I just thought, if supposing it had said this, in the London Borough of Merton, behaviour that causes nuisance or annoyance to any other person as a result of the consumption of alcohol is prohibited. What's wrong with that?
All I can say, Councillor, is we've had very detailed discussion about the necessary wording on the signage. Whilst I appreciate your suggestion is succinct, this is what we have finalised on, unfortunately. And this allows us, we've got to take legal advice when we do these things. This allows us to be confident that we can enforce the PSPO. And so, that's where we've kind of come to. I take the point of what you say, but we are where we are on the signage.
Can I just clarify, Calvin? It sounds to me like these, everything they're printed and it's a fait accompli. So really, we're just being shown it, and it's all already happened. I mean, I take on board there's a lot of rather a lot of text, which I think we're all probably in agreement with, but it doesn't sound like there's much we can do about it. But I do think the important message that needs to get out there is that this doesn't stop people having a picnic in a park and having a couple of beers or a glass of wine, which wasn't the object. This is to stop people that have had too much to drink and antisocial behaviour. So I think we don't need to dwell on it too much. I think we've made our point that it perhaps should have come to a working group before it was printed, but it has been printed and we know the reasons why. But maybe if Calvin wants to come up, otherwise we could be debating this all night and we're not going to get anywhere.
Chair, thank you. Absolutely.
Sorry, Calvin, can Agatha just add? I think she'll probably be where I am as well.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin. I just wanted to say that the way this is worded, I mean, we've been through that, but it would make people feel that they will be fined. Definitely will be fined. I know it said, but if people don't get fined, that will become another issue, because you've got these things saying the maximum fine is £500. They're not giving their names to the police. They're not doing that. And they're saying people might come back again. So I think if you're giving them leaflets, something has to be on there that, they will be fined if they don't do it once, a second time, they definitely will, because you will have an issue of people say, well, they put that up and they're not fining them. I haven't seen anything on the website. The council's just going on that they're going to do this again. So, that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. When the last meeting I came to, I said a good outcome of this PSPO, because of the reasons in which we were implementing it, would be that we have 0 fines and hundreds of interactions and engagements with members of the public who to bring about some awareness, but also that we would get people diverted who have troubling substance misuse issues into treatment. Now, members will have an opportunity to scrutinise the performance of the PSPO. I believe we're coming back on the 6th of September to talk about performance of the PSPO, and I think by that time, having been live over the summer period, we will see, if there are problems with signage and wording of signage, we will be able to pick those up. So yes, enforcement is a last resort. Yes, it's something that we could get to, but actually, I would suggest that we want to see far more engagement with people in areas like Mitcham, for example, who don't think the council have done enough to combat these issues, and there are other issues around the borough as well, hence why the PSPO was made borough-wide. But absolutely take your point, and I think I'd be quite confident we'd be able to show something meaningful when we come back for the ASB update on the 6th of September.
Is it quick? Because I think otherwise
I wanted to suggest a compromise, and that is that correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't I read that we start off with these signs, and then we go to more expensive metal signs in due course? Am I right with that? Did I read that somewhere, or did I make that up? Anyway, what I was going to say was, if there is a second generation sign, is there therefore time to reconsider the wording before the second generation, more permanent metal sign is put in place? Yeah, but I'm just wanting to. But isn't that an opportunity?
They're going to look at the results and interaction, and then they may have a second generation. Just listen to the answers to the question.
I think we're going over this when they've already been printed, and I think Calvin and Katie have done a good job explaining it. I think what Calvin said about coming back on the 6th of September and giving us an update on how they've worked and what they've come across is a much better idea, because the signs are going up if they then go to metal. But I think that will, I think it's pretty pointless us going on much more until we get them back on the 6th and see the results and see what's happened. Then we've had a trial over the summer months, which are traditionally, there'll be more people out drinking in our parks and streets probably. Calvin, do you want to add anything to that, or Katie?
That's a succinct conclusion, Chair, from my perspective.
On a different point, it's ironic that at a meeting in which we're going to be praising the process of scrutiny, that at this very meeting, we are given something to scrutinize that is unscrutinizable. I'd like that minuted.
Well, okay. Thanks, Tony. No, I think we've already said, I covered that earlier. I mean, it's already been decided this, they put the sign up. I think they've explained what's going to happen. Let's see what comes back. They're doing what legal have told them. In a perfect world, it would have been nice to have perhaps given it a final say so, but the deputy leader has signed it off. And I think we need to see now what happens, and we can maybe fine tune it as a consequence of what we get fed back to us on the 6th of September. So with that, I think we'll close that item. Thank you, Safer Merton, Katie and Calvin for attending tonight, and we'll see you on the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dan, do you want to go as well? Thank you. Thanks, Katie. Right, next we're on to item 6, the annual report, which you've all seen, so I'm going through. You've got the scrutiny report in front of you. If you've got any comments, I think one thing that isn't in here is the member survey, which doesn't get included, but that is something we've had last year. The feedback wasn't so good, And I think I put it down to the fact that a lot of councillors weren't standing or perhaps knew we had quite a turnover. Unfortunately, this year we followed the same pattern. So it's a little disappointing that we haven't taken up, there hasn't been more people feeding back to Scrutiny with their thoughts on it. So I think my own view, and that's something that we need to talk about, we've got plenty of time before next year, and it's not really in the report, but I do think that next year we need to focus more on that at full council, perhaps get some paper copies and people do it and hand them in at the end, which is what my predecessor, Councillor Peter Southgate, did. And it was successful for a number of years, apart from last year. So I think that might work. But as we go along, if you have any thoughts, I think we'll add that separately. But I would like to thank, we've got the two other chairs of CYP and Sustainable Communities. So, and yeah, and health, thank you, very important. They're all important and they make us up. So thank you for being part of this panel and thank you for everything you do. Scrutiny, as I know our colleagues there would also say, it's very important. It's a vital part of a councillor's work and what we're here to do, to scrutinise the council. So I do think there's always room for improvement, but I will finish and let you, if you've got any comments to make on the report. I know it's been circulated, but we'll start with you, Stuart.
Thank you. I just have two quick things. One of them, I was looking at the scrutiny and numbers bit, and it says plus, and it goes 11 scrutiny referrals, recommendations to cabinet. I mean, I'm pretty sure in one meeting alone I passed 7, or we passed 7, and so I just want to just check that number that wasn't that was 11 and not. We passed a lot. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, 11 doesn't look too many, but it just, yeah, there's a lot of it. I'm sure they're passing them as well. So I just want to just check on that. And the other thing was a more general point on just kind of public engagement and how we promote these meetings. And maybe this isn't quite the place to talk about that. But one thing I'd love to do is just think about how we can get more members of the public involved. Because I mean, I notice every meeting's very, very rarely, and I don't know about the other two panels, we have members of the public present. You know, if there is someone, it's probably because they're speaking on an item. And whether there's something we can do around sort of comms, and maybe it's something I could have brought up with Polly or whatnot, on kind of putting things out, meetings out on social media, giving people a good notice that things are coming along the road. So, you know, a week today, we're going to be discussing flooding or, you know, air quality, and giving people a chance to kind of put in their questions and have them brought up, because it does sometimes feel a bit of a siloed thing that we are, you know, we're bringing this up and, you know, that's our job, but it would be great to have some more public representation, and then be something to look in next year in terms of those metrics of how many members of the public, how many questions we got, things like that, to show that there is that involvement from them as well.
Stuart, thank you. I completely agree, really, and it is a shame actually that Polly's gone. I don't think she had had anything. I think we can certainly let her know, as she's only been here a couple of months. I think it's something that we can feed in, because you're right, public engagement, it is important, and a lot of people need to know they've got a voice, and I'm sure that it will be somewhere on that large list of things that she has planned for this borough. So I think we will remind her, because scrutiny is important, and let people know they've got a voice and they can be heard, and the channels. But I think I know someone will speak shortly, but I think the work you've done with bringing young people in, obviously that I know we're going to review that later, but I do think that's worthy. I know you'll want to probably say a few words on it. So perhaps we can have you before Agatha, if someone wanted to speak. But Usama.
Yes, you judged that correctly. But before I talk about the young inspectors, just to speak on Stuart's point around making these meetings more accessible to members of the public, one of the exercises I found really useful ahead of this new scrutiny year was the consultations to select scrutiny topics. So this year, having been more experienced as a scrutiny chair, I asked Stella to organise meetings with various stakeholders and individuals who work with children and young people, and to get their views on what their key priorities are and how they could feature in our work programme. And I found that to be really useful in putting together a work programme that actually reflected what the community's priorities were. And a lot of the time it was aligned with some of the issues we were aware of, but now we can also say that, you know, we've got the backup of the individuals who actually work with young people. And I also spoke to groups of young people themselves through support from Toby and through Sook Power as well. And so I found that really useful. And that's just one way that we can engage members of the public when we're coming up with our work program and areas to focus on. With the young inspectors, just one key point I wanted to clarify on the report, because it was a key feature of CYP and all of our panels over the last year. And of course, you know, we've still got a few more months of this pilot. I thought it was important to feature it in this annual report. And we've got some feedback from one of their inspectors, but Stella still sort of needs to edit, you know, to add the young inspector's name and fix the template a bit. So it might look slightly different when you get the final copy, but it's really minor changes. But I just wanted to make you aware of that, Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for your work with that. And it'll be good. I'm sure that it might encourage some more younger people to take an interest. So no, well done. I know it's the passion feeds through. So thank you.
And sorry, Chair, also to add that, like, it's also going back to what we're talking about, recruitment and changing sort of how people perceive the local authority. If, you know, we get people in at these early stages and they see how local government works, they might consider it as an employer going forward.
Absolutely. No, brilliant. Agatha.
Chair, I just want to go back to what Stuart said about, you know, getting residents involved in you know, joining in the scrutiny panels. I just feel that unless you've got something they're interested in, then they won't join it. They won't have the, because I've seen that, you know, the number is 2,000. You know, it's quite a good number, but we could get more. But you have to have the topics that they're actually interested, or something that's affecting them. You know, then we can actually get people in. You get the ones who are curious, will have a look, want to listen. But to really grip them, you really need something that they're really interested in, and then, you know, you'll have them actually listening to you. So I think that's what we've got to sort of aim at really. As you said, if we're doing health or something, if we advertise or we're talking about, I don't know, breast cancer today, then maybe you can attract more people, more women or more men to get involved. But unless we advertise and these people have these particular issues, that interesting topics they like, you know, we can put on whatever we like, they won't come. But if we pick the topics or let them know when they're interested, they will come.
No, you're quite right. I think we all know as councillors, if we're having a residents meeting and there's something there, be it planning or local issue, if it's something that affects them, you know, there's no problem putting bums on seats and having standing room at the back. So no, very good point. Thank you. Is there anything else anyone wants to? John.
One little thing that I didn't understand, so I just wondered if we could look at the wording of it, page 4, the bit at the bottom on the left. This year, 2 additional councillor-led task groups were conducted with reduced officer support. And then it says how successful that was. And it kind of read to me like, well, things work better with reduced officer support, which I'm sure isn't the intention. So maybe you could just look at what the wording of that. And then the other thing I wanted to suggest was, since this is presumably mainly an online piece, is it possible where there are reports or reviews or whatever, just to have hyperlinks to them so people can click through and find out more about stuff that's interesting?
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure a hyperlink would be possible. That's certainly not beyond, and certainly I would think, again, that's something that will be worked on clearly from what we've heard tonight from the executive directors. I think there's going to be more obvious accessibility to reports such as this. And going back to your first point about reduced officers, I mean, I think that there is reduced, we don't have as much support as there once was.
But then it goes on to say that this has increased activity within the function and provided more opportunities to put forward recommendations on issues of public concern. Well, it just seems weird that reduced officer support should lead to all those advantages. Well, that's how it could be read.
I understand your point, councillor. I think it's meant, possibly the wording, maybe we could look at
Just have a
that.
little look at it
It's-
because, like there might be someone else like
The,
me.
the increased activity is more the fact that councillors have been engaged this year and there's been such a large amount of topics to look into. So that's the increased activity, but we have
that's
done
what
that
we
with,
might be trying
with
to get at.
reduced resource.
I'll turn my light off now.
And take that as a compliment. No, we've got a very good panel at the moment. That there are some very good questions tonight. Well worth them being. I think if anyone was watching online on YouTube, they won't be disappointed at some good questions there. Anyone else got anything? Or I shall move on. Okay. Item 7 on our agenda. Identify questions for the Borough Commander. Now, I touched on it briefly earlier. Obviously, last time the Borough Commander came before us, she'd been in post a matter of just a few weeks. So if you have any questions, which I know you will, and I'm sure Councillor Kohler will, can we get them to Rosie by the 24th of July? I think, there's plenty of questions we all have, and there will be some crossovers there. So I don't think you'll need reminding, but yeah, get the questions into Rosie, and it'll be for the Borough Commander to answer. Okay, item 8, work programme. You've all got the work programme at the back. Is the work programme agreed? Will I get that? Yeah. Nods of heads. Okay, thank you. Is the FMTG agreed? Yeah. Financial, yeah, you've got that. You're going to agree, I'm sure, Councillor Oliver. Okay, well, on that, I'd like to thank you all for giving up this evening and coming on and making it very worthwhile. Thank you all. Thanks for being part of this panel. Have a safe journey home, and thank all our colleagues online. Thank you for taking part tonight as well.
Just add that Councillor Hayes sent his apologies during the meeting, so if they could be added.
No, that's not a
He was
problem.
unavoidably detained.
No,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, and good night.